wanted to thank Richard Cole for coming and providing this FERPA training for us. He's originally from the registrar's office. And this is interesting. I didn't even really know about FERPA until I started working on my master's. And when I heard it, I said, I have no idea what FERPA is. And come to find out, I wasn't the only one. A lot of people really had no idea about FERPA. So I felt it would be very beneficial to us in our department if we not only had the training, but we also recorded it so that we could allow other faculty members to view it. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Richard Cole. I'm the registrar. Some of the faces look familiar, others don't. But thanks for having me today. Funny story when we talk about not knowing FERPA, right? FERPA has been around since 1974. So this isn't some new thing that's out there, but it's been out there a lot of years. And I remember when I went to college, and I didn't know anything about FERPA naturally as a student, I remember my professors leaving papers out in boxes for us to go and pick up in the, at the department office, and we'd have to go pick up, and go through everybody else's graded papers to find our own. I remember professors posting grades by your social security number on their office doors. Now, I went to school a lot later than 1974 for my undergraduate, and and all of these blatant FERPA violations were right in front of us. It's a wonder many of these colleges are still in business, and they haven't, been subjected to more complaints. I'll get to that in a minute. So, in any case, how many of you are truly not familiar with FERPA? It's fine if you. Okay, so this is going to be a good training then. What I'm going to do is start off. This is a very basic. Can everybody see this? The colors are a bit bright. Want me to shut the lights? Okay, great. So FERPA stands for the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Again, it's a regulation that was established by Congress in 1974, granting the students 4 rights. Students have the right to see what an institution has on file for them in their record. They have the right to seek an amendment if they feel that there's a piece of information that's inaccurate. And this is what we're going to be dealing with in red. They have the right to privacy, to expect privacy, and to consent over who their record is shared with. And finally, if they feel any of these 3 rights have been violated in any way, they have the right to file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education Family Compliance Office that their FERPA rights have been violated. Any questions on this so far? So again, we're going to deal with the privacy, because that's really where we tend to get into sticky situations where we have parents or spouses or other entities that may be looking for information about a student's progress. So we're going to discuss these things. If you come across any of these, you should really refer that to Michelle, who can work with the registrar's office just to make sure we're in compliance if someone does seek to amend a record or something like that, okay? One word I want to say about that. Amending a record doesn't mean I don't like the grade I got. Amending a record would usually mean if there's like a student code of conduct charge or something that's transcribed on their record, they have the right to put a statement in there as to their version of the story. But it doesn't mean you didn't give me an A, I feel that record's inaccurate. Okay, so I just want to clarify that, because that can cause some confusion or nervousness. Okay, so why is understanding FERPA important? Even though this is the real important one for us, I always say it protects our students. In this day and age of identity theft, in records fraud, by making sure we protect the information that we have in our possession, each and every one of us, we are preventing information from getting into the wrong hands of someone who may want to use it that shouldn't have access to it. Okay, so you have ID numbers, you have names, you have addresses, you have all kinds of information as faculty members you have access to. There may be forms that you're giving students in your class, regarding certain insurance or certain assignments. all of that is confidential and you wouldn't want it to get out there. So really, we're protecting our students, okay? We're protecting the college, okay? The under FERPA, the sanction for a college that violates FERPA blatantly is the loss of all Title IV federal funding. So that would be our financial aid funding, which would put most colleges in this country, unless they have a very wealthy endowment, out of business. So we really can't afford to lose our federal funding. So by making sure we're vigilant about complying with FERPA, we're protecting students and we're protecting the institution. And I always say it's the ethical thing to do. I don't want my information shared. I'm sure none of you want your banking, your health care, or any other kinds of information shared without your consent and knowledge. So I feel that, you know, we have an ethical responsibility, if none of these are compelling reasons, to make sure that we are protecting our students' information. Questions so far? Okay, yes?
This is so when your child goes to college that you're paying $50,000 a year from, you can get their information and their grades? Is that, that's what this is?
That's what
under
this is about, correct. And your student, if you're paying $50,000, $100,000, has to give consent.
Exactly.
Has to give consent for a third party to be able to access their records. So that's what this is about. So I gather you have a child or had a child that went to school?
I'm done, but I went through this.
Yeah, and your child had a consent?
He signed off that I couldn't see his grade.
You could not or could?
After I paid $50,000.
Could
Yes,
not.
I know.
Wow. Well, there you go, bingo. That's exactly why they were doing it.
Of course, just like down in the clinic, there's more than one place.
I missed one.
Good question. I missed one.
Sorry.
So what is an educational record? Just throw it out there.
Transcript?
Transcript, yep.
Yeah.
What else?
Would Canvas be a record?
The information, grades information in Canvas, exactly, that would be an education record. Everything that we have in our possession is considered part of the record. Okay, so whether it's your attendance, if you take attendance, grades, graded assignments, all of those things are considered part of the education record. So I want you to think of just about every piece of data as being part of the student's education record. Okay, there's no question about that. Grades, schedules, where a student is on campus, what their next class is, that's all part of the education record. Okay, doesn't matter how we store it. It could be a piece of paper like this. It could be something on the computer screen. If we store it and we own it, we're responsible for protecting it. Okay, so that's really important. And I always talk about, I don't think anybody ever wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to violate FERPA today. You know, but I think that I always talk about our unintentional consequences of our actions. If we leave papers lying out on our desk, or we send something to a printer that has students' personal information, and it's an open public area, and someone else sees it that isn't authorized and doesn't have an interest in that student, we just have violated FERPA. If we leave our computer screens open and we walk away and our grade book is up there, we have just violated FERPA, okay, if someone else has seen it. So we want to think about our everyday actions and how we can change those behaviors to not put us in a position that we may be in a FERPA violation, you know, when you didn't really mean to. It's like going through the stop sign and saying, I didn't see it. Well, you're probably still going to get the ticket. You know, and so we have to think about those actions. So I want you to, you know, kind of think about the information that you work with, how you can safeguard it. I like to turn things over. If you come into my office and I have any student documents and they're on my desk, I'll turn them over. Unless Superman comes in chances are person can't see through the paper. I'll put them in a file folder. Very simple methods to just protect the information. If I leave my desk to go somewhere, I'll minimize or shut down the application that has the student's information in it. Okay? All very, very important things. Any questions on that? Now this last note, this is important for you. There's something called sole possession notes. So if you have notes that you take that you don't share with anyone else, the regulation terms those sole possession notes. Those notes are not part of the education record. So if you have an assessment and you want to take some notes on your own, not to be shared. I once heard Leor Rucker, who used to be in charge of the Family Compliance Office in Washington, he referred to them as memory joggers. If you have notes and memory joggers, things you want to take, but you don't share them, those are what's called sole possession notes. That is not part of the education record, which means a student cannot demand to see those notes. They can't seek an amendment to those notes, okay? Because they're private already and they're only viewed by you, there's no privacy issue there. So think about that. If you are in a situation where you feel it's necessary to take some notes or keep some, logs of something, as long as you don't share them, that's not part of the education record. Any questions on that? Yes?
Do you actually have to call them sole possession notes? Is there a way to label them that everybody would know that they were sort of off limits?
Once you say everybody, it means that there's a public, that's a shared document. Call it a private file if you wish, but again, once you share it, if you share it with the chair of the department, if you share it with another faculty member, that's no longer a sole possession note. Sole possession means only Michelle's going to look at that. I'm not going to bring it to a department meeting. I'm not going to discuss a student's progress using these notes. Okay? These are very private. But they could be useful at times if you're in a situation where you feel it could turn into a lawsuit or turn into something bigger and you decide, you know what, I want to take some notes about what occurred and, observations about behaviors, just in case.
Then it does become a legal document if you needed to use it in a case to protect yourself?
It can, but it's not part of the education record at that point until you share it. Okay? So what are the basic rules? I think we're doing good on time. Please ask questions as we go along. Education records, regardless of student's age, that's an important one. There's a misconception that a student who attends here that's 16 years old don't have FERPA rights. Well, that's not true. Okay, all along, up to the point that a student enters in a post-secondary institution, the parents have rights to see the records and inspect those records and have conversations about progress. Once a student enters into college, no matter what the age, the right to privacy, FERPA rights, transfers to the student. So now the student has to authorize access. And that's really a change of what most parents are used to, right? You're used to just walking in, parent-teacher nights, getting letters, having information. All of a sudden, you're told, I'm sorry, we can't talk to you any longer. You have to get your child's permission. Not much changed over that summer between a student graduating high school and entering college, but yet the rules of the game change for the parents dramatically. But regardless of age, we have to treat the student as an adult and respect their right to privacy and get consent if we're going to release any records about them. We all have responsibility. Doesn't matter at what level we are in the institution. We all have responsibility for protecting records. And that's every office. I mean, I've met with the copy center on campus here to talk about protocols to prevent mistakes in mailings that can have potential FERPA violations. So everybody has this shared responsibility. We have access to information for legitimate educational interest. This is a term that's all throughout the regulation that talks about one's legitimate interest in that student's record. So that means that by nature of being an employee at the college, it doesn't mean we have the right to access all of the information in an education record. So, for instance, as faculty members, you don't need to really know the financial aid status of a student, okay? That's part of their education record, but you don't really have a legitimate educational interest. In fact, I don't have a legitimate education. I register students and maintain academic records. I don't look at financial aid records. If I poked around in there, unless I had a real reason, I was doing research because I was asked to do something and I had a legitimate interest in that student, I'd be violating FERPA by accessing their records because I don't have a legitimate educational interest. Got that? Great. And if you're ever in doubt, okay, I'm going to give you a handout after this. It's kind of a cheat sheet that summarizes this. My phone number and my email address is on there. Never be afraid to please email me, call me. We get all kinds of very interesting cases, and some of them are head scratches, some of them are easier. I just had one from history and social science the other day. A faculty member was contacted by a parent. Their student was hospitalized. He's okay, but he was hospitalized and couldn't make it to class. So this parent was asking, can you send me the homework assignments and the things so he can keep up with the class? So the faculty member, who knew somewhat about FERPA, wrote to Tim Hack, the chair, and said, I don't know if I'm violating FERPA by doing this. Anyone, do you think we'd be violating FERPA by doing this? Yes, can I see, show of hands, yes?
By sending the homework home or sending it back?
Sending it home.
Home.
Sending it home. Picking up the homework for the student and sending it home to them. You're not allowed to pick up the student's work, it's not your work.
Anybody else have a different opinion
Is
about
it
that?
blank work? It's like a blank work?
Yes,
It is blank.
it's assignments,
Yeah.
not graded, just, this
Somebody in the
is.
same class bringing it home for?
Oh, the parent was asking, can you send the homework to me so my student can keep up with the curriculum? Do we think that's, so I have a bunch of no's, any yeses here?
Sounds stupid, it is. It's the right answer,
Do
no.
I have anyone who thinks it isn't a FERPA violation, and why?
That's not personal
Because
information.
it doesn't
So you're changing your mind?
No, I didn't,
Oh, you
I
did?
didn't make a commitment.
Now, we want you. If it sounds
And why not?
ridiculous, it is, therefore.
Why
it
not?
is.
Because there's no grade attached to it, there's no information attached to it.
Bingo, very good.
But coming back, well, no, there's still no grade.
Until it's graded.
Right.
So it's not part of the right now it's a blank assignment. You just gotta do X, Y, and Z, write an essay, hand it in by this date. Right now, it's not part of the education record, it's just informational.
But if you have, does it have to be the student that calls or sends an email that says, can my mom bring this work home for me?
In this case, no. In this case, it's not part of the education record. It's an assignment.
We would need proof that it's actually the mom.
Right. Exactly. We say the medical clearance, we would ask for DNA testing.
Saliva testing.
Saliva testing. No, it's not the mother, don't be doing.
But that was a great question, and sometimes we have to take a step back and say, would that be? And I remember I was on my email at 9:30 at night reading that. I was like, well, wait till now. This is an easy one. I'll just
Right, but see what it
respond.
makes you do? It makes you overthink.
Overthink.
You get loss of common sense, goes out the window, you're worried about rights all the time.
But it's better to overthink
It is.
than have a potential. Like I'd rather get a question like that
Yeah.
than someone release something. And then if they get into the habit of releasing that, then all of a sudden your mind begins to play tricks, and then you think, oh, well, I shared assignments
Right.
before, I can share a graded assignment. And I don't want anyone to go there, But, you know, it's common sense. It's definitely common sense, you know. There are many ways we could try to help a third party along without releasing content in the education record. We could talk very generally about, you know, about information, you could talk about what's required in a class, what's required in the program, without talking about the parents, without talking about the student's progress to the parent. You know, you can answer some questions, you know, you can hand the syllabus. You can hand the syllabus to the parent and say, these are the requirements for my class. You are by no means releasing anything that's in the education record of that student. Okay, so you know, it is common sense. Sometimes it's a judgment call. But remember, if you're just sharing very generic, you're not sharing information that's really student related, then you can guide the process that way, yes.
So if a parent calls to talk to a professor to ask about what the requirements are for the class, and they're not sharing any grades that the students have gotten, then the teacher can talk to the parent
That's
about the
correct.
requirements.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But what will happen is that there's creep.
Yeah.
There's creep. I have one question about my son. I have one question about my
Well, what
daughter,
if
so.
the kid has already said, I don't want my parents
Oh,
knowing
that-
anything about me?
Like
Well-
Chris's son.
Like Chris said, right.
Well, again,
Because they're
if
not
you're
graduate. They're
shar-
not specifically asking about the kid, they're asking
if
about
you're
the
sharing
class.
generic
Yes, it's all
information
knowledge,
about the
it's all
class,
Okay.
then you're not releasing anything about that student.
If you're showing
Now,
the
that's-
syllabus, you're
But
okay.
it's sort
That
of like,
said, you
it's
have
sort
the-
of like a kid saying, like, if the kid says, I don't want you to know anything about my grades, and then the parent finds out, and they say, well, this assignment, do this thing. Did you do this assignment? Then they're like right on top of them, and they're kind of, you know.
Well, again, it's a discretionary thing. If you have a student who feels that strongly, then I wouldn't share anything. You know, but again, you can share it. You wouldn't be in violation of FERPA if you shared it. But if you want to respect the student, then you can say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to parents.
I have a question.
Yes.
It may involve legitimate educational interest, and it's really opening up a can of worms. So this is the deal. It applies to us. So there's a clinical course, and there's one instructor that deals with the lecture portion of the course, and they give out the tests, and they give out the homework assignments, and they give all the written information, and they keep track on Canvas of all the grades for the lecture part of the course. Then you go into a clinic part of the course, which both have to be passed in order to get to the next level. And you have 26 people in the clinic that come in and out. And they are doing clinical grading separately. But they are on the roster. They can look, I think, it used to be, it used to be with Ms. Cruiser, if their role is such as faculty, they can look at the grade that each student got. Is that, and change, I don't know if it's the same in Canvas, but I think it is. Is that legitimate educational interest? Not the changing part, but is that, do we have to change everybody's role? Because then they don't get it changes a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're all collectively working on behalf of that student, right? You're all, you know, you're teaching one portion of it, they're teaching another portion of it. I think there's legitimate interest, and I'm sure that there are some consults that may happen between the two faculty members at times. Discussing the progress or discussing, you know, what's in the best interest of the student. If you're working in the best interest of that student, then that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a problem. But if those clinical or those dental faculty were assigned to a history class, you know, that would be a questionable practice. But I can understand the synergies between, those two roles in teaching the same group of students. Okay. Any questions on any of this? Okay. So here's the big one. What should I do to avoid FERPA violations? Do not use any portion of a social security number or ID number. Don't post grades.
I have a
Yes.
question. Because it's the first one. Do not release any portion of the social security.
Yes.
When we have to order film badges for our students, for radiology, measures radiology, we give out the last 4 digits of their social.
And what is that for now?
It's to another company that we ordered dosimetry badges to monitor their radiation
Yeah, but it's
exposure.
not on them. When they have the badge, the number.
But it says don't give out any portion of their social. I give it to this company. I give a portion of their social.
Why do they need the social security
I
number?
don't know, that's what I was,
It identifies the student.
yeah.
And I think we need to, we need to look
It's
into
a-
that a little
Yeah,
more.
those radiation
They're-
numbers.
They're checking levels of radiation that somebody could potentially be exposed to, and I don't know if it has, we have to check if.
You just give a different number, you
Yeah,
don't
you
give them
can-
4,
you-
1, 2,
yeah,
2.
you
You give
can-
number
you can
1, you
assign
got
them a
number 2.
number.
Assign them numbers.
Yeah, I would, if
Stop
you
doing
can
Social
use a
Security.
different number, tracking number in some
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
maybe the last 4 digits of their student ID number.
Maybe a little
Um,
bit.
that would be better. Social security number is a real
You
no-no.
give the last four of their social, that's how they go.
Yeah, I wouldn't use anything, 'cause the law says you can't use that to identify a
Is
student's
birth date, okay?
Birth date would be fine.
Okay.
That's directory.
I know.
But we can
I know.
talk a little bit
But I
about
think that's
that.
also what they require.
Great question.
They require the last four social and their birth
But
date.
how do they know it's the last four of their social? They're not checking it.
I
That's
don't
what, you know
know.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I'm just
Yeah, I don't
saying
either.
it's possible that there could be some federal
Yeah,
regulation
could be.
Attached to it.
that
Could
is
be.
attached.
And then the way we deal with that is we get the student's consent.
Okay.
When they come into the program, we have them sign a consent that we have to order this, we have to release X, Y, and Z to order these badges. It's for your safety, for your protection. I don't think you're gonna get anybody that would probably say no, and if they do, then we have to find an alternate way to, okay? And we can talk more about that.
That's different than a college.
Do not communicate grades or any other kind of information to a student. If you have to use email, and it shouldn't be Campus Cruiser anymore, I forgive. If you have to use email, use the Middlesex email. Okay, that's the only way we have kind of an expectation of privacy. So don't use Gmail, don't use Comcast, don't use AOL if you're communicating stuff in the education record. Okay, you can always talk in very general terms, like what homework assignment did I miss? If you're just going to email the homework assignment not graded, you can correspond that way. But once you get into, oh, I missed the test, or how did I do, or can you give me some feedback on something? It always needs to go through the MCC email account. Same way, if you're emailing a change of grade or any other type of thing as a faculty member, we won't accept it without it going through your Middlesex email. We have no other way of having a digital signature, if you will, that authenticates you. We have to, have MCC email. That's the only kind of common platform we have. Don't post grades, circulate class lists, don't leave completed exams or papers. And these are my own personal experience. I would hope that with technology today, we no longer do that. We've had instances here where, for some reason, a faculty member felt compelled to post a kind of a grade sheet with all of the information on all the students and all the grades they got on assignments on their website. You scratch your head and say, why is that necessary? But over the years, I've seen practices like that at other schools as well, where the faculty member just feels it's easier. Just go to my website, I have it all up there for you. Not realizing, we had to take that down in a hurry. Don't assist anyone other than a college employee if they have a legitimate interest in finding a student on campus. So if someone shows up in your class looking for a student, direct them to the police. Direct them to the police. We don't know why they're here. Unfortunately, I've seen too many cases of domestic violence over the years where I've had people show up to campus and it's not a pretty situation. So we really, that's why schedule information is never considered something we can release. It really does protect the student by not releasing their location on campus. Police are ready to deal with that, so direct them to the police. They're ready to deal with that. And if someone is here for a reason that's legitimate, then they will go to the police. If they're here for any other reason, they're not going to probably show up at the police and pursue finding that student on campus. Certainly you can report it to the police as well, and that's probably a better practice. Don't discuss progress of student with anyone other than the student unless you're sure they have a signed release. We have a consent form. I could show you a sample of it in the registrar's office that a student signs, and they give consent for a parent or a spouse to have access to their information. We put that into colleague. If you get a student's parent who feels strongly about talking to you, we can check that to see if they have that on file. You know, go to Michelle, she can email me, we can let you know. Again, we shouldn't be dealing with that on the phone. If the parent really wants information, the only way for you to know who the parent is and that person sitting in front of you is for them to set up an appointment and meet with you. We don't want to be, even if we have the permission, we don't want to get lax in ensuring that the individual we're sharing it with is in fact the person who's authorized to have the access. Okay, I know it gets tricky. Don't leave any personal information on answering machines, and don't release personal or academic information about a student. You know, recommendation letters are funny. I'm sure all of you get asked to write recommendations. I would have the student give you a consent authorizing you to write that letter. Why? Because
Like an email request, is that enough, or it has to be?
I would have them give you written consent.
But wouldn't
Just
an
to
email-
protect yourself.
Wouldn't an email to you asking for a recommendation, letter of recommendation be consent enough if they're asking for that?
Here's the issue, here's where I take exception with that. How do you know what the student defines as a recommendation versus what you define? You may go into areas talking about how they did in the class, talking about, you know, I'm not saying you would.
But how does that change whether
Because
they do
the
authorization?
language in it will expressly authorize you to release what's in their education record. So then no matter what you write and what you say, that's part of the education record. They can't come back later and say, you know, you shouldn't have said that, or I didn't think you were going to say that, or I didn't think you were going to share that. So it's all in the language. You know, an email that just says, hey,
Well, let me take that one step further.
yes,
What if you write somebody a letter of recommendation and they don't like
They don't
it?
like it,
They don't like, you didn't recommend me, how do you know?
Exactly.
you can't control that.
Right.
Well, I'm just trying, we've had situations where faculty members have written letters and then the student has come back with that very, you know, complaint. They didn't like the letter, or they didn't think a letter, this information was going to get shared in that letter. And unless it's a very standard form, you may all have different styles about what you incorporate into the recommendation. So I'm not saying don't write them, students need them. All I'm saying is you, like anything else, a consent form gives everyone consistent language about what the student's consenting to. An email doesn't. It just says, can you please write me a recommendation letter for this? Now, I don't know when you write a recommendation letter what your observations are in that recommendation letter. Are you going to say they were an A student? Well, that's part of the education record. Or are you just going to say they showed up to class on time, you know, I don't know. Different people put different things in there. So what I'm saying, I'm recommending is that you just use a standard consent form which authorizes you to release content from their education record. And then you can go where you want to go with that.
So where do you send them to get that? To the registrar?
Well, no, I can send a supply to Michelle, you can have them on file.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do a lot of it. And you
Yeah.
can say no.
You could say no.
You can say,
Yeah.
no, I don't feel comfortable writing.
You could say no, absolutely. I just
It's
wanna-
nice to say.
Well, you can't say it myself.
So this is the student authorization, right? And I'm sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy on here. But this says, I understand signing you, I'm waiving my rights of non-disclosure of my education records. Okay, so by the student signing this, they're giving you permission to release it to, this is what we have them fill out if they want to have their parent access, and also what they can fill out if they want an institution or organization, if they're asking you to write a recommendation letter for maybe a job or something.
With
Yeah.
that, just based off of that, if they're applying, say they're applying to a couple of colleges, and I'm just gonna throw it out there, and they want you to write that letter of recommendation that it's gonna go to 3 different colleges, they would need 3 different forms, no?
This form has spot
Okay.
for 2 different institutions, 3 different individuals.
Okay.
So, no, they wouldn't need it. Also, you can look at the language on the consent form. Sometimes the recommendation or the college recommendations are written in a way, bless you, they're written in a way that you know, does have language that says you can share information. Sometimes it is written like a consent. But many times I find the receiving institution aren't really thinking about the FERPA rights of the student who attends here. So I'm concerned with the faculty here, bless you. And, you know, if someone does get a negative recommendation, they don't get in somewhere, and they didn't waive their right to access that letter, all of a sudden you're faced with, well, why did you share that? And I didn't think you were going to share that. So having kind of standard language that says, hey, you authorized me to share what's in there, you know, it just kind of covers you.
What if you had a student graduate and then a dentist called you and asked you an opinion of that student and they were going to hire them, a verbal opinion?
What are they asking?
Like, well, what did you think of that student?
reference, right?
Yeah,
That's
reference.
like any reference, and that gets dicey.
Right, so-
FERPA doesn't speak to giving a reference, and references are dicey.
Okay, that's my question. So am I wrong to say something to the dentist that I know what that student was like in clinic?
You have to be careful.
Yeah.
You have to be careful.
How about, I guess you're.
Just like,
They're not a student, but it doesn't matter. Was there information that they had when they were here?
just like
Because
any
I had a dentist
job,
call.
just like any job reference, you have to be
Yeah,
very
right.
careful.
Should be former students,
You
sure.
have to be very careful if someone doesn't get a job because of the reference you give them.
Well, wouldn't that be, say,
And-
even if they weren't a student and someone calls another former boss of yours and that boss didn't like you, I mean, why can't that person say, I didn't like you? Why can't we say things what we really feel anymore?
I don't know, Toddy.
I gotta lie now?
I wonder that myself. I didn't make the
I guess you
rules.
could say, there's getting that in here.
Yeah, I didn't make the rules. But
Okay, that's how you say it.
Okay.
I can't really say, but if I say, you're getting closer.
But FERPA does not,
It doesn't do with,
yeah, it's about education records.
okay,
So again,
so
I'm-
verbal,
It's
okay,
the
we're good.
It's
Yeah.
the in FERPA.
Okay, so let me backtrack. So we have a form that consents to release, and under the law, the student has the right to prevent release of information.
Oh.
Okay?
Don't let them ever see that form.
They have the right to say, I don't want the college to acknowledge a relationship with me as a student.
Whoa, really?
Okay, now,
That's weird.
well, again, I'm going to say that very few students do this, and I'm not going to say every student does it for this reason, but in the many cases that I've seen at institutions, it's been domestic violence situations. So usually when someone feels that they need this level of security on their record, and they feel compelled to say, I don't want my name in the graduation program. I don't want you to give a job reference if someone calls and they're looking, because I'm afraid someone may be tracking
for them. Okay.
we do have situations like this. I don't know that they're domestic violence, but we do have students who sign this. So this is another way that, again, we have to be careful when you're giving out references. What was that?
Witness protection.
Possibly, who knows? Who
We were just in
knows?
clinic when we wanted to check the source patient, and they didn't want to go get checked. They said, I am not going, do not disclose, I was never here, they said.
Oh, if somebody needs a transcript though to prove that they've been there, then
They
what
can't get
happens?
it.
Student consents to release a transcript.
You
This
subject
this is dealing with other types of information that the college can release without the student's consent. Like when we print a name in a program at a graduation, okay, any type of directory information. We have to take their name out of those types of publications. So and this student can request that, and that governs everything that we have. So if you have a student who has signed that they want their stuff kept confidential, we really can't release anything to a third party. We can't even acknowledge that they attended the college or they're a student. We have to make believe there's no relationship with them. That doesn't mean as a faculty member, as a department, as an institution, we can't communicate with each other about students if we have a legitimate educational interest. This is talking about those cases where someone does call to verify that someone graduated, or they call to verify that someone attended the college. Or we, as I said, we send a list about, we send a list to the college photographer at commencement that these students are going to be attending. All of that kind of stuff we cannot release without, you know, when we have one of these on file.
This doesn't apply to us so much because they have to register to get a license. And in order to register to get a license, they have to prove that they go into an accredited institution, you know, like
Sure.
going backwards.
Sure.
It's interesting, but I don't think it would apply much to us.
Like I said, we probably have 3 students, if that many, on campus at the moment who have something like this, if that many. I mean, over the years, there may be 30, and that's over the decades that have signed this, and we may have nobody here who has signed one of these currently active. They may have graduated or moved on already.
Where are those people
Okay,
today?
questions on that? Because I know some people have to get out at 1:30.
What if you have investigatory people coming in, like, you know, you don't know, the student could be here today, and maybe they're unscrupulous, or they're whatever, they're, you know, got a lot of issues, and, you know, years down the road, you know, they have these thoughts in their head that they're not gonna be leading a straight and narrow path. So they might wanna sign something like this, just so that nobody comes after them later.
Well, that's not our, I mean, yes, yeah.
I mean, but what if like the FBI, you were saying, what if the FBI comes looking for students?
If the FBI comes in, they'll have to have a subpoena, and we deal with subpoenas. That is totally separate. FBI, Homeland Security, they all come in, they know what they have to bring. They're very well prepared. I've been served with Homeland Security subpoenas, where I was told that if I tell the student that I have this subpoena, they're going to arrest me. So there's all shapes and sizes. Direct that to my office. We can deal with any law enforcement looking for someone. Okay, and so emergencies on campus. Okay, everybody remember what happened at Virginia Tech years ago, right? The sad part are all those people who lost their lives, and many people at the college at Virginia Tech, with the misunderstanding of FERPA at that time, thought that they couldn't share information about all of these danger signs. There were many officers that saw signs in the student that they were a potential threat to themselves or others, but everyone said when the investigation was done, well, I thought because of privacy I couldn't tell anyone, I couldn't share. FERPA, you know, I've been in this profession as a registrar since 2002. That was never my understanding. My understanding was always, even before Virginia Tech, was that if we feel that someone is a potential threat to themselves or others, we have to get them some professional help. And FERPA does not preclude us from doing that. We have to get them help. So tell the police, tell the counseling office, tell the chair of the department, we have to refer them to get them some professional help. I'd rather have a FERPA violation and act with caution and get that person some help than not do anything and have another situation and be sorry about it. So, you know, I always kind of leave on this slide that, you know, never feel that if someone's a threat to themselves or others that you can't talk. FERPA does not prevent that. Okay? So any questions? I think I'm right on time.